from the Lecture Teaching Fellows Program. We have Mark Bauer and Margaret Kolb. They have a very, very inspirational project that we were so excited to bring into the fold this year. So we're going to hear more about it, but it's about mentoring for writing, and specifically scientific writing. So go ahead and take it away, Margaret and Mark, and let us know if you need anything tech-wise.
Yeah, thank you. So Mark, you're sharing slides, right? Cool. So hi, I'm Margaret Kolb, and together with my colleague Mark Bauer, we're presenting on our work building out peer mentoring for scientific writing at the Fung Institute for Engineering Leadership, which is where we teach. So Fung is an interdisciplinary program, and it's housed in the College of Engineering, and students with quantitative backgrounds are engaging in really diverse, really cross-disciplinary projects to pursue a one-year master's in engineering. And the program has a particular focus on leadership and also on students developing strong communication skills. And to that end, Mark and I teach E295, which is a one-unit writing-focused communication course that supports all of the development that our students take on over the course of the year. In particular, the course was designed to support the master's thesis, which has always posed a really big challenge for our students. And it's to smooth out that challenge over the course of the year is one of the main goals of our course. Crucial facts about E295 for our purposes today are that it is one unit and it only meets for 1 hour a week as a result.
Yeah, so we found that our students are across the board enthusiastic about improving their writing skills. What we found though is that their writing experiences kind of coming into our program are really various. So as you'll see from some of our graphics here, this is sort of our breakdown of who's in the program this year. The key kind of thing to note is that about 80% of our students are from other countries. A big portion of those are coming from China. And so some are coming in with a lot of experience, very polished writers and speakers already that we're able to really sort of just mold further. Others are coming in with very little experience actually doing academic work in English. I've heard from some students that the presentations that they give in my class are the first presentations they've ever given in English. I've had kind of anecdotes from some students about needing like 10 hours to write just like a paragraph for some of their first assignments. So that's sort of, I guess, one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum would be students who are already very polished and are just looking to kind of do better. They want to become sort of thought leaders, kind of the best possible speakers and writers that they can. So we have a very, again, broad spectrum of students that we're working with. This becomes a factor, I think, especially in just looking at our curriculum over the course of the year. We have at the beginning of the year a pretty short assignments. By the end of the year, they're a lot longer. So the kind of overall page count and the assignment complexity really, I think, increased quickly over the course of the semester. And our goal, as Margot was kind of suggesting earlier on, is to better scaffold these initial stages of the program to really kind of help students get ready for the demands that they face at its end. So again, at the beginning of the year, we're just doing these kind of like short professional bios, maybe under a page. By the end of the fall semester, they're doing like 3 to 5 page op-eds. By the end of the academic year, they're doing actually sort of like a 30-page or so master's thesis, give or take. That is a team-written document, but nonetheless, students need to be able to kind of navigate these long pieces of writing and also be able to read like long academic research articles in preparation for these thesis papers that they're writing.
And throughout those assignments that Mark's just described, we've really seen firsthand the power of individual one-on-one mentoring to make a really strong impact on students' ability to tackle a challenging piece of writing. In particular, this fall, we found that informal writing mentoring, and by that I mean one-on-one writing mentoring between an instructor and a student that wasn't baked into the syllabus or fully specified in semester plans, it allowed us to support over 50 publishable op-eds that came directly from student assignments that were facilitated by those mentoring sessions. So what you see here on this graphic is a screenshot of the Fung Medium Channel's homepage from May 5th. And all 3 of these op-eds are drawn directly from our courses last semester. And we've used other op-eds written by our students to illustrate some of our subsequent slides so you can get a sense of how far-ranging their topics are as we continue the presentation. In general, this assignment has had a huge value for our students because from the beginning in the fall semester, they're choosing what questions they want to consider, they're researching them, and they're discovering above all that they have something to say. And as they're making those discoveries, they're uncovering the tools that they need in order to articulate their points of view. It's super exciting for us as mentors to come along for that journey, but it is extremely time consuming. With 180 students between us this past fall, and that was teaching half-time for one of us, mentoring our students individually in this way to support assignments of that caliber is incredibly rewarding, but it's often infeasible. And so what we're hoping to do through this project is to institutionalize the kind of learning that the op-ed assignment embodies and to make it sustainable.
So what we're proposing then is to institute a peer mentoring kind of program as a supplement to our classes. We're envisioning that this mentoring program would give us the ability to foster, to allow stronger writers to develop further, and our less confident writers to be able to kind of receive that sort of additional scaffolding and support that we mentioned earlier as kind of the program becomes more demanding and more complex. Now we're thinking specifically about mentors as the way to do this, as opposed to say tutors or GSIs or other kind of instructional support, because one of our goals here is to create a peer-led process of writing development and co-learning. Our goal here really is to kind of get our students to be thinking about writing as something that is collaborative, something that is very dialogue-based, something that is really kind of drawing on constructive feedback, constructive questions, rather than the sort of isolated struggle that we're seeing kind of depicted in this painting here, but also it's kind of distinct from a, I guess, sort of top-down, sort of instructor-led process of just sort of giving grades on a paper and then having students go away to kind of just figure out how to kind of get the A or do the thing a bit better. What we would like to see is students to be able to identify their own kind of places to work up better. Anything from sort of like small sentence level things to much larger sort of like, is my op-ed persuasive kind of questions. And we think that those kinds of questions are going to be better addressed through kind of, again, individual sort of one-on-one, I guess, sort of goal setting, rather than, again, a more kind of curricular top-down model.
So mentor training, which we're happy to get into in more detail in the Q&A, if that's of interest to the group here, would include frameworks for supporting these mentoring sessions ahead of those mentoring sessions. And this training we envision would be broadly applicable to many leadership settings. We would, for example, teach mentors to offer productive feedback, teach them to ask why, what if, and clarification questions, teach them to specify the impact of a piece of writing rather than, or at least before, offering particular solutions to a perceived writing question. And because of that, we anticipate that mentoring experiences would really accelerate mentors' development as writers and editors, and would be a valuable leadership experience for the mentors themselves, as well as offering a huge amount of support to the mentees receiving the mentorship. So at the same time as instituting a mentoring structure that cross-pollinates the various student groups that we have here at FUM, we are proposing giving the semester a point of focus for all of these mentoring activities by reorienting the fall semester toward the op-ed assignment. This is something that's happened informally in some of our E295 courses, but we're proposing that we institutionalize it so that all of our mentoring sessions have a particular point of focus brainstorming topics, researching ideas, revising, and so on. And we could institute mentoring training that would address each of those particular writing stages.
So overall, we're seeing peer mentoring as a key addition to our existing instructional architecture. Once again, we think that the more frequent meetings between mentees and mentors would better enable the kind of culture of writing process than we're able currently to create during our one unit, sort of once a week writing classes. This sort of flatter hierarchy of sort of peer-to-peer mentoring, we think is going to be more conducive to a more, again, sort of processual thinking about writing than would a sort of peer instructor or peer GSI relationship, and sort of get the conversation away from kind of the usual pressures of performance and evaluation. And then finally, this peer-led structure would allow both mentors and mentees to kind of tailor our, I guess, their sort of 295 experience to address their own specific needs and interests probably more effectively than a more sort of top-down instructor-driven model. The takeaway, kind of, like I said, the payoff from all of this is potentially stronger leaders, stronger writers, and in general, just more voices joining the conversation. Peer mentors, obviously, we get direct leadership experience by working with their mentees. Mentees, I think, would also get some good leadership experience in being able to set their own goals and kind of be more responsible for their own kind of path through their curriculum. So I think we're going to kind of leave our kind of overview there for right now, but we're happy to take any questions and kind of continue the conversation in the remaining time that we have.
There was one question that came up in the chat, just to go back briefly, asking, when you say pages, do you mean single-spaced journal article style or double-spaced student paper style?
Generally double-spaced, at least in my classes. Margaret, are you also double-spaced?
Could you repeat the question, please? My muting technology got a little bit beyond me.
Just to clarify, when you say pages, are you thinking of like more article style, single spaced, or student paper double spaced?
You know, I generally think in word count. So their master's thesis is about 5,000 words. Some are much longer, some are shorter. We start with the LinkedIn bio, so like 100 words, and the op-ed in between we're pretty flexible on, but you'll see that many of them are between 500 and 1,000 words. 500 is very low, 1,000 is probably more average.
Yes, Kathleen.
I'm curious what the mentoring sessions look like, what the just more about the mechanics that I'm trying to envision. I'm sorry, I'm being very like granular because I'm trying to think of how to adapt this or what parts could be adapted to a class I already teach.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk through a particular, we have a slide on this just for you, Kathleen. I'm happy to talk you through it. So for example, if we were doing mentoring activities with a revision focus, we would support mentors ahead of time to actually undergo these activities themselves as peers with their mentoring class. And we would then invite them to engage in these activities with their mentees. So to support, if we were at the revision stage for the op-ed, we might do any of these 3 activities. So to pick one, we might ask them to go through a particular paragraph that they've decided that they really care about for whatever reason, and to talk through that decision first of all. And then to underline every single verb. It's a really comforting activity for students because students can quickly, whether or not they go into the session knowing what a verb is, they can quickly identify the verb, and that's comforting in and of itself. And then the questions that we want to ask about each verb in this relatively short chunk of writing is, excuse our noise, is how is this verb working? Are there other verbs we might consider? What, you know, if the verb is occurs again and again and again, that's something to notice. You don't have to fix it right away, but it's something to notice about one's writing. So getting students to do that initial assessment and then getting students to talk together about what alternatives there might be and how, by what metric they would judge another verb or another sentence more successful.
Thank you. That's really cool. And so how do you choose who the mentors or who are the mentors? Where are they drawn from? Or yeah.
Well, that's where it gets interesting. So we are a 1-year program, which means that all the students are starting pretty much at the same time. But as we've already kind of found, we have some students who are coming in already, very strong communicators, strong writers, and then other students who would really benefit from additional help. So we're thinking perhaps of, there are I think a number of possible kind of ways to get this going, but we're thinking potentially near the beginning of the year, we might have a sort of a 7 to 8 week class that's kind of focused on the kind of mentor training. These would be people who sort of applied to get into this class or in some way kind of expressed interest in sort of being mentors. And then we can sort of then vet in various ways and kind of make sure they would be good at this. But we also think that in addition to simply having strong skills, we think that just sort of the willingness to kind of invest in this process is going to be probably almost as important as actually having that kind of the strong skill base from which to build.
There's another question that came into the chat asking, are the mentoring activities all in person, so done on real paper or through some other method?
Preferably they're in person, but I think that's something that we still have to work through as a program and as a course. I think we envision supporting them in person with as many structural encouragements as possible to make the course start to feel like a writing hub for scientific communication, so that students are really engaging with their writing more than once or twice a week when they're completing their weekly assignment.
And another question just came in, is there a specific science aspect to the writing mentoring?
I think there is, especially as in 2 ways, especially as the year goes on and students are talking more specifically about their sort of capstone research projects. The writing does become a little bit more tailored to, obviously to their projects. Throughout the year, though, we are helping them figure out how to talk about scientific sort of ideas or concepts in a way that is accessible to a wide variety of audiences. Because we are an interdisciplinary program that is also working with kind of people in sort of the business world as well. We're trying to get our students able to speak to a number of kind of technical and non-technical audiences at the same time. So the op-ed that we've been mentioning really is sort of like a popular type science article as opposed to like a sort of peer-reviewed research article. So I guess the sort of sciencey element that we're working toward is really just kind of making the science clear and digestible to people who are not necessarily within students' individual fields.
And so we're close to time, but maybe we can take one last question here. Is there an aspect of interviewing scientists and reporting on their work?
That's a great question. There is. One of the other assignments that structures my semester, and I think also Mark's semester, is an interview of somebody whose career in science the student admires or is interested in or wants to learn more about. And these have also been published on the Fung Medium channel, although not as frequently, just because of how the semester, where the semester crunch falls on both assignments. They don't generally both get the same attention, but students have interviewed Berkeley professors, they've interviewed people whose lives in tech they think are super interesting, and they've done all sorts of interesting things with that assignment as well. So one possible next frontier for really nailing down a strong writing structure in the fall for this program is to think about making that assignment more robust.
There's a lot of interest, a lot of excitement in the chat for your
Yeah.
project. So yeah, it's great. Maybe we can just squeeze in one more question. Well, there was one, do any of your students submit their op-eds for publication? And then also what happens during the class time with 180 students? I know we're supposed to start switching, but briefly, if you're able to answer that.
So the publication tends to simply happen through our Fung Institute Medium channel. So it's a sort of in-house-ish kind of social media publication. It would be great to see them students submitting more widely, and that might be a great sort of I guess future goal for our kind of assignment and program. The 180 students are not all in a room together. We have multiple sections, about 30 students apiece. In the fall, I was teaching 3 sections. I think Margaret was also teaching 3 sections. So that's kind of how we get to our 180 student number.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Margaret and Mark. It's great to hear more about the project. We were fortunate in the lecture fellows to hear like, hey, this is our idea, and so like seeing it move along and come to more fruition with the challenges that you have to face, within the program is going to be really great. I'm going to go ahead and turn to our next speaker. So we have also current LTF member, Sanchita Saxena. She's talking to us about learning modules where you're going to harness the expertise of practitioner in a classroom teaching. And so she's really trying to provide tools that other teachers can use, which I think is really, really helpful. So Sanchita, go ahead and take over the reins, and we will assist you with tech as needed.
Great, thanks so much, Michelle. So can I share my screen? Yes, okay, let me just. Okay, so can everyone can see my screen, right? Okay, great. So I don't have a formal presentation because I actually wanted to take you through some of the modules. So I just thought I'll go through the different sites. But just as a background, so I started thinking about this project actually during COVID when I was teaching, and I started teaching actually as a lecturer at the Haas Business School. And as part of my class, which was on Zoom in 2020, I had a series of guest speakers, and of course they all came on Zoom. And I had them all give about a 15-minute presentation, and then we had an interaction with the students. And what got me to think is actually all of the speakers, they did a great job of just sort of summarizing the key concepts in 15, like maximum 20 minutes. It was like a really good short synopsis of a particular issue. And it got me to thinking that, these are all, just wonderful like experts and practitioners in the field doing a lot of interesting work and really bringing their kind of knowledge and expertise into the classroom. And wouldn't it be great to somehow share this with others who might be interested? So that's how the project developed. And I was, as Michelle said, I was a LTF a lecturer teaching fellow this past year. It was a great experience to get a lot of feedback from my fellow my cohort. But I just wanted to quickly, so the page that you see here, this is Haas's sort of sustainability at Haas page. And my class that I teach, it's on business, labor, and global supply chains. That actually falls under this sort of the Haas sustainability emphasis. And they have, for example, a graduate certificate in sustainability. And so my class and others would fall under that. But what Haas is also doing is that they are really trying to encourage, they're actually formally encouraging faculty who teach some of the core business school classes and trying to integrate sustainability concepts into those classes. So that was another reason that I thought of this project, because I thought some of the speakers that I've invited, what they were talking about was actually, could be integrated possibly in other Haas classes. They could also be integrated in other classes kind of around the campus. So from that, combination of teaching on Zoom and having, guest speakers come in, and then sort of this emphasis on bringing sustainability into coursework, into the syllabi, I sort of thought of developing what I'm calling these learning modules. So I'm just going to take you to and just give us some examples of what this looks like. So right now, these modules are housed on our LTF B courses site, just as a place to put everything. And and I just want to sort of take you through. So I'll give you an example. So I have 2 modules up. The plan is to work on a few more, to have 7 total by early June. And so each module has, so I'll share this. So it starts with the teaching guide, and this is kind of the guide for, so everyone can see this, right? Yeah. So this is a document that's a guide for a faculty member, someone who might want to integrate this concept into their syllabus. And so this is a teaching guide. This is a module on citizens and consumers making change in the global fashion industry. So it starts with a short introduction, a learning objective, then a description of the speaker video, and I'll show you that in a moment, but just, the speaker bio, who that person is that's giving a short, who the video is about. It includes a reading, and that reading is also something I'm including in the module. And then this was some great suggestions actually from my cohort, which I've integrated into the teaching guide, which is different possible assignments that can be done around this topic. So these are just suggestions, of course. I mean, those who are teaching can take what they want from this module, and they can take pieces of it. I mean, the idea is just offering a variety of things, and then the faculty members can just take what they want if any of it sort of resonates with them. So possible assignments, like a short 10-minute, more of like a discussion forum prompt, to everything from like an in-class debate on the topic, some of the issues that this topic raises, what that might look like, or a take-home assignment. So actually a longer assignment, kind of trying to engage with some of this material. And then a set of key teaching points that kind of comes out of the themes that are kind of coming out of the video. And then, so it kind of ends there. So that's kind of what the teaching guide looks like. Sorry, let me go back to the module. So then I'll just give a short clip of what the video looks like. So this is, I've had a student kind of help me with it. And
my name is Aisha Bernblatt, and I am the founder and CEO of Remake. We are I see some waves. We are a nonprofit based here in San Francisco, California. And I'm just going to go through maybe like halfway, and just to give you a sense. Everyday people, if we want this industry to do better by people on the planet, to give us actionable ways to do that. So fast forward very quickly, I'm going to share with you 3 campaigns that we have recently won, to give you an example of the power of citizens coming together to really make changes happen in an industry. One of the things that's interesting to me, and in the Q&A, I'd love to.
Okay, so that just wanted to give you a little bit just of a sense of what the video is like. So these are short videos, and they're kind of, it's taken from the long video, the class recording, and this is just a short, nothing is going to be more than 20 minutes. So it's very easy for someone who's teaching a course, wants to sort of bring this into the classroom. They could literally just show the video and engage with some of the teaching points. That's all they really need to do. If they want a much longer engagement, they can do, go through some of the assignments, assign the reading, which I've indicated here. There's some presentation slides that the speaker shared. So they can actually, the idea really of these modules is it can be it can be added a little bit, or it can be a full, part of a lecture in the syllabus. So that's kind of just an example, and I can show just maybe one more example. I know I want to take some questions, but this is another topic on gender-based violence in global supply chains. Again, this is not certainly only useful at the business school. This could be used, for example, I said in the introduction, the labor center, departments of sociology, anthropology, political science, gender and women's studies, possibly even other departments. So again, it's the learning objectives are included. There's a short video. This is even a shorter one. It's like less than 12 minutes, a reading, and then again, possible assignments and key teaching points. So that's kind of how they're structured. And I just want to give one more. So the plan is, so right now, as I said, this is kind of just housed here on the B Courses page. But the goal is eventually at the Center for Responsible Business. So this is where I sort of teach out of at Haas. They're very interested in housing these learning modules. And so I don't know exactly where and how we're going to do that. The hope is by the summer, once all of them are created, so a total of 7, they can be housed somewhere here, and maybe under a curriculum, and maybe they would have a separate section, or I'm not exactly sure, but they're very interested in this. So I think that would be great to have it eventually at the Center for Responsible Business, have it on their website. But if it doesn't work out, I'll look at other alternatives. But I guess I'll end there, and I look forward to any questions. And I can just stop share. Should I stop share, or maybe I'll just stop share? Yeah, if you have any, if you want me to go back to anything, I can just share my screen again.
In the chat, it was just praise. So we might want to wallow in that for a little while. But if people want to raise hands and ask questions, should feel free, or just jump in.
Yeah, any questions? Yeah, thanks for your feedback. Yeah, well, maybe I can just talk briefly about the challenges. I mean, I personally am not particularly adept at any of this kind of technology. So it was great. Actually, the funds from being a fellow, I was able to put towards hiring a very techie, smart student who was able to help me kind of make them look nice. That was my thing. I wanted the videos to be standalone and look nice. And for some of my cohort members, you'll remember that they were really basic to begin with. So she's definitely done a good job, just sort of bringing it kind of together, and it's like as a standalone video. So that was really great. And I guess I guess what I'd be most curious about, if anyone wants to give feedback, what I was most interested in is, would something like this be useful? I guess the content would vary depending on, of course, the kind of class you teach, but I really do want it to be something useful to people, and I am definitely willing to work and try to develop it. Like I said, I had some great feedback from my cohort this year, and that led me to add things like assignments and stuff, which is just making it more practical. But yeah, curious if anyone would find something like this useful, not necessarily the topic itself, but just the concept of being able to plug something in into your syllabus and sort of pick and choose the kinds of things that you would want. Yes, Steve, question. Hand up.
Yeah, Sanchita, totally useful. I've had guests come on live, and I think I've designed some prompts and lesson, but you've like really just put it to the next level. I mean, it's that the concentration on the prompts, on the debate, on the packaging of the video itself. I mean, just kudos to you. It's just wonderful. So
thank you so much. Yeah, and again, the student really takes all the credit for the videos. I'm terrible at this kind of stuff, but yeah, thank you.
And someone noted in the chat, what a good idea to hire a student to do that.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah, they're far ahead in at least from my point of view in all these kind of things. So yeah.
One of the things that came up during our lecture teaching fellow sessions was like it was readily obvious the value of these modules, and then we did a lot of brainstorming about what would make you as an instructor feel comfortable using these and plug and play. Like what about that? So I guess I want to put that question to the crowd, like you know, the chat's bubbling with excitement, and it's just like what would make you as an instructor like grab this? Like what would make it enticing or assist, like ease of use?
Well, I would say that definitely like the plug and play aspect of being able to just take it, adapt it, or use it however might fit in my course would be very attractive.
That's great. Yeah. I actually during my class when I started teaching in 2020, I actually as a resource, I mean, separate from even before I even thought of this, and then now I've integrated that into my syllabus. In addition to readings, I assign actually short videos. Just because I think students absorb material in various ways. And so I've gotten a lot of good feedback from students about that. And again, short, it has to be short. It can't be, rarely do I assign something that's longer than like half an hour, but something like just, you know, someone speaking about something, it just, I think students can grab or grasp that material. It's different than reading it yourself. And so that was also the thinking behind this, that, you know, there's just so much great content out there. And I was just lucky to have such great speakers who come and who are willing to do, you know, they come sort of year after year. And it just seems like I wanted to capture that in some ways. So yeah, but it's great to hear that it could be useful. And like I said, you know, it will be up as a resource. So if you just want to show the video or assign the video as in one of your, you know, as part of your syllabus, it will be available for that as well.
I think part of what's inspiring, not just that you've got actual practitioners, you know, sharing their business acumen, their vision with you, but like just that one that you showed us, I was like, oh, she went to the Goldman School of Public Policy. I was like, what year was that? You know, and it's just like there's a piece of it that's like a sneaky like career training of like,
absolutely,
little did you know that this is a path you could be on when you're you know, an inspired Berkeley student trying to make your way in the world. And so besides, you know, the kind of the gravitas and the import of like the topic at hand, the fact that these actual people went on this journey is, I think, is a neat piece of it, and like kind of an aspect that I think any of us could engage with, no matter what the discipline. Is just like that career pathway part of it.
That's actually a really great point, Michelle. And I do ask all the speakers, because I'm teaching at Haas, especially for my MBA class, you know, part of it is also to like, you know, offer different possibilities or career possibilities. And I actually asked them all at some point to talk about their career journey. And it is like several of my speakers are, you know, graduates, Berkeley grads, you know, not just Haas, but public policy or other departments. And actually, yeah, I mean, that is a kind of a great idea, what you're saying. I mean, this could be useful just as, you know, not only the concept, but just as like a career type of thing. So I wonder if, I mean, there could be other places, you know, I don't know if the Career Center or other places would be interested in these kinds of things, but yeah, it's definitely great examples of what Berkeley grads are doing and interesting work. And like I said, I sort of asked them to talk about their journey at some point in the, either at the beginning or at the end, and they're all happy to engage with that. But yeah, that actually gets me to think maybe it could be a useful resource in other in other contexts too, outside of the core topic. Well, thank you very much. I think we're out of time, but thank you. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you all for coming.
We do this in class sometimes, but can we just like unmute ourselves in a round of applause for Sanchita and Mark and Margaret, just so they get to feel the vibe. Woo! So Patina will go first, and Patina teaches skills related to science writing, and so take it away, Tina.
All right, can everybody see my screen? Thumbs up. Okay, thanks. And as Michelle said, my name is Patina Mendez, and I'm a continuing lecturer in ESPM. And today I'm going to talk about a class project that I developed for my undergraduate research course. And this project was really focused on the process of reading scientific papers. And I teach a junior level research course in environmental sciences as a class in ESPM. And it's a big 4-unit course. It's got 40 to 70 students. It just depends year to year. And I have this set of learning goals where I'm really wanting them to develop the ability to, understand terms and definitions, develop writing skills. Like, it's loaded, right? There's a lot for them to do. But ultimately, what I'm really interested in is teaching them to learn to read and traverse scientific literature, because that is the hardest part. Because if they can get this core thing where they actually feel confident with reading, then they can do the more derived things that develop the thesis proposal, develop persistence. And what they'll do is they'll use this when they take the year-long senior thesis course for ES, which is a required thesis class for every student in our major, regardless of honors or non-honors or whatever, that they'll take for the entire next year. So I really see this as this idea that learning to read is really about organizing information in your mind. And once you have that skill, you can transfer it to any context. So this is really one of the big learning goals and the basic foundational learning goals for the class. But as we all know, all of us who have read academic literature at one point or another, it is heavy. It has a complex paper organization. Students, we're all inexperienced with the terminology in many of these papers. They're difficult to read, right? When you put that together, it becomes really difficult to read. And then you also have to figure out which ones you need to read. So you have to figure out how to search the academic relevant literature. Then you have to figure out how to understand the argument. And then you have to be able to understand these like gaps of what's missing so you can develop your own thesis project. So when you put all this together, you can see all these spaces where students can kind of get lost in the process. So in my course, that's not the only challenge. There's a lot of stress and uncertainty because they have to write a thesis. It's a big project. No, a lot of them have never done anything that big before, and they kind of dread it sometimes for multiple semesters. So as a result, I use a specifications grading system that's really focused on almost like a pass, no pass for every assignment, but at a high level. So we're working really hard to get them to iterate till they produce really strong work with a lot of revision. So there's lecture assignments that are individual, and then there's also lab assignments that are group assignments. And as you all know, if you assign group work, it's a challenge. A lot of negative experiences of students from past group work. So I'm going to talk about a little data that I collected as part of a separate project as kind of the foundation to preface this. And what it is we had some, we did a survey where we talked to some biology students, and we wanted to know, like, hey, if we give you this hypothetical group work situation, which looks surprisingly similar to the project that I'm going to propose in this class, what do you think the challenges will be? And they said, well, communication, nobody responds to email. Oh, we can't get together. I just going to have to do all the work because nobody does any work. The contributions aren't clear. And then, oh, somebody doesn't do quality work, or I do better work, and what it really pointed to, we asked them also, what kind of support do you need? And they said, we need time to work in class. We need accountability so everybody like really knows what they need to do. So, right, okay. So the reason to do group work, really, we all think about the way that science and research works is that it's teamwork, right? And that's what we're always saying. We want you to work in teams because you're gonna have to work in teams in your job. We want you to work in teams because it's important. And there's this really great paper called Team Science, and it really talks about, we're all really united around the scientific goal, but it takes a lot to do that. Okay, we have to be self-aware, we have to communicate, we have to develop trust for our teammates. So if you look here, there's all of these different things that come in, and you can see how like it's actually a lot for junior or novices to navigate this space. So when we put it back together and think about what the way a student sees it in terms of working together, there's all of these different uncertainties, right? And there's risks like grades and stress and social anxiety. So they divide things up, and then they get worried about other people. We all do too. I've worked in collaborations. We all have these same experiences. So we're trying to figure out how to make it a final product. How do you divide it up? And all of this comes together to become uncertain about stress and anxiety. So then there's always protective behaviors, doing everything so it gets done. You're worried about your grade, or maybe not responding because you haven't done your part yet. So we get these negative experiences with group work. And so this is a very self-perpetuating cycle. So the project that I put together for students to do is what I call the literature resource collab. So really thinking about collaboration is the end goal. It's even in the title. And I put students in teams instead of groups to really connect from that group work issue. Students were allowed to select their topic, and it was really a content requirement for them to put together a Zotero library. It's a group library. They needed to learn how to use a tool. I set it up so each person contributed 10 references. They had to link the article so you could find the original resources. They had to write an annotation, a common practice that we do for research. And they had to either do a concept map or a notes page. They had to do a piece of deep information to contribute that they could all draw on as a resource. But I also put in process requirements. So not just the product, but the process, like how do we do this science together? So each group had to, at the end of all of this, write a one-page summary of, basically the meta information. What is this for? How did they put it together? They had to produce a dictionary of words they didn't know, because we often will skip over words we don't know. They had to do a bibliography, because again, a skill they need. And I also made them turn in meeting notes, which I provided a template for. So each meeting they had in lab, they had to say who was doing what. So if somebody missed a meeting, they could catch up. They could see what was assigned to them. They could write in the meeting notes before. So there was templates for that, dictionary, all of these different things. We gave them all of the lab time for all 3 weeks. The GSIs were available. And we also had a team office hour meeting with everybody, with any of us on the teaching team. And there was a daily schedule of lab. You should accomplish this by this date. So what the product looked like, and these are different pieces from different student assignments, is a Zotero library. So really learning how to use that tool with all of the information. And here's the attachments, the paper, and then the notes file that this one had. And you could click in and do that as well. So they had to write an annotation, and I gave them a format for that. Concept maps, which we had taught them how to do earlier in a different assignment. And then also a literature note worksheet, which is actually something that I wrote that I use and say, look, this is something I use. And it helps break apart all the different pieces. So what you're seeing here is all of these pieces of organizing information. How do we as scientists, how do we as academics and researchers organize information to be able to write? So what I wanted to do was also evaluate the activity. And I really had 3 questions that I'll talk about here. And the questions were, was it too much? Was this too big of an assignment? Because these are the skills we use. And are they really aware that it's this many layers and levels? As a team project, how was it? And what do the students learn or gain confidence in doing? And I'm a big fan of the design-based research model that really focuses on this iteration across your curriculum building, so that you're constantly like evaluating, reflecting. And so I wrote a 28-question survey to answer these 3 questions. Of course, there's more data that I'm not going to show. It took them about 8 minutes to do, and I'll talk about those outcomes here. So the first question I had is reading papers. Was this too much work? And so I asked the question with the little slider on Qualtrics, how many papers did you read before you felt confident in navigating a research paper? So just like getting through it and understanding where everything is, understood some of the material presented in a paper, and became faster at reading and skimming. So you can see like it goes from this lowest level skill all the way up to like really becoming and feeling confident, proficient. And so what we see here is that, you know, right around 6 or 8 papers, you know, it's like 4 to 10 papers is when people are really starting to feel like they can read, understand information, and then also becoming faster. And it took a little longer for them to become faster. So was 10 papers right? Yeah, it's probably about right. It's about what it takes and coming up on this asymptote here. So in terms of the workload, of course, students thought the workload was high, and it was high, but it's a demanding thing that's achievable for them. And so some students would have preferred to do about half as much and be able to do them deeper, but the goal was getting to them to this proficiency of skimming. So by limiting the time, they had to move faster, they had to become more selective. A few students had trouble with relevancy because they fell out of love for their idea and interest by reading these papers, but that's a good thing because then they learn they need to move on. And then I got some constructive feedback that said, somebody said, I really enjoyed this assignment. I think it could be slightly better, more structured towards finding an appropriate topic and using things like the dictionary effectively. So really good thoughts about how it worked. So how was it a group work experience? How did it compare? And so I just said, look, compare it to other experiences. And what I see here is that a lot of students really felt that it was above average experience, a few far above, somewhat above, but in general, a good experience. And students said, I think this experience was better because it ensured that everyone actually contributed something to the project rather than one person doing all or most of the work. And for the others, getting equal credit for it. Okay, so thinking about helping them navigate that weirdness around who does what. And they also felt that everyone pulled their weight. And the part that I liked the best about this is everyone was good about talking through things we didn't understand. People weren't afraid to talk or ask questions. So really using their group as a place to externalize. But of course, there are always challenges. Half our group was gone about 80% of the time. And this is not untypical, you know, it happens, right? In terms of learning and confidence, how much did they gain in these skills before and after the literature resource collaboration assignment? How confident were you in reading papers and understanding the arguments in papers? And so in terms of reading, we went from people just really having some experience and then moving on all the way, and then understanding papers not so much. But what they learned was about large amounts, being able to take it on, giving themselves more time, and then really starting to build persistence and understanding what they needed to do. And finally, what did I learn? It was about right. And the scaffolding pieces are really important and really helped. So I think that all together, it came together. I still have a lot of data to get through, but I think together there's still pieces that could move forward. But as far as I'm concerned, I think it was largely a success. And I just want to thank everyone who supported this project. And I'm happy to answer questions.
I realize you did all that assessment. That's so cool. I would love to promote, you know, anytime you do a major overhaul in a course to try to assess as you're going through, it's really helpful.
Yeah, and it's fun to think about, like writing the questions really helps too, about what I wanted to know.
There was a question earlier in the chat. I just said, would love to hear more about the team office hours.
Oh yeah. So what we did was we just asked the students, they had to sign up for an office hours, one of us, and we're just like, what are y'all thinking about working on? How's it going? And giving the space for them to ask questions about what they're uncertain on and come in. And a lot of students, because they're learning the terminology still, you know, there was one student, they were all talking about these different things and they didn't see how they were connected. And I was like, I think y'all are all talking about ecosystem services. And they're like, oh, is that the word for it? And so really giving that opportunity to give them the language for the search terminology too, because that's like another really hard skill for them to learn. And connect with us, because we want it to be a group growth, you know, we want them to grow over the semester. How did I grade for collaboration? Well, that's an interesting question. We didn't grade for collaboration. And I think that was a really important thing that we didn't do. What we did was their thing and everybody got the same grade for it. And since it's pass, no pass, like we wanted it to get to a certain level. It's usually like around a B+ for specifications grading. And then for if there was somebody who kind of fell out, what we did was we disconnected their grade from everybody else's. And then when they finish theirs, they just have to update the summary. And so we're creating that space for people to catch back up, still be part of it, but also not hurt the group. And I think that was really gave people some space as well, because some students really had a hard time getting started. Yeah. And I'm also happy to answer questions in one of the coffee breaks or offline. I'm happy to share the assignments, any of that sort of stuff. Just drop me an email. It's here.
Could you speak real briefly? I know it's a huge topic, but about the spec grading and your processes with that, because I know that you found it to be very successful.
It's really, spec grading is this really neat system because you're not taking every assignment and saying, oh, this is a 89.4. It's like, here, oh, look, I'm expecting this level of proficiency on this assignment. This is the goal I want you to get to. And did you get there or not? Okay, you're like, is this really quality writing? Did you have all the things we needed? And instead of trying to create a rubric where you're kind of like doing all this, we're saying we give them feedback and then they can resubmit, and they just resubmit until it's there. And from the outset, it looks like you feel like, oh, that's going to be so much more work, but you're actually mentoring people in a very short stream. And then after that, the assignments, they kind of know how to get through that process themselves. So I found it's been really helpful, especially with writing over really long periods, because 3-semester course sequence is like, you don't want to knock people down just because they're learners, especially with writing. So we're trying to encourage and promote and move forward. So it's been, once I heard about it, is just tremendously useful for my class, which is a writing course, effectively research and writing, because we have to give that space for learning. And I'm happy to talk and share my syllabus on how I've structured those as well.
Do you have any preliminary data yet on how this benefits the later semesters? Because you're teaching some of those later semesters, but I didn't know about like the timing of it.
So this is a junior level course, and I actually don't normally teach this course. I taught it about 10 years ago, and then I came back in to teach it. So this is the course that feeds into my year-long senior thesis course that I've been teaching for 13 years now. So I'm going to actually have these students for 3 semesters. And this was a great opportunity to really establish that like relationship and trust towards building their thesis. So it's a really exciting, and it's going to be lovely because I'm going to get to be able to hit the ground running with this group because I already know them all, and their topics and how they work. But it's really meant for them to really learn how to do these like what are really advanced skills by the time they leave. It's a lot of project management for them to learn. It's a lot of how to write. It's a lot of navigating relationships with mentors, planning a big project. So, and they have a big symposium at the end of the year where they really bond and support each other. It's a really neat major. It's a really fortunate thing I get to do. And hopefully I answered your question.
I think you did. I think we,
Ellie, did you have a question? Ellen, sorry, Ellen.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Michelle, is it okay, or do you?
yeah, go for it. We're okay.
Okay. My question is, before they did a deep dive into this project, had they already had a sort of a structured how to read a paper? Like, do they go through that first together with you or with other instructors?
So this was probably about 3 weeks into the semester. And so in class, parts of the paper and all of that sort of stuff, and starting to read and understanding where research questions live in papers and how it maps out across. So we do that. They also have been working on a reference matrix. So really trying to just break out pieces of paper with about 10 papers total, which can overlap with this. I want them to be able to use everything. And then also they had a group concept map assignment where they all read a paper together and built a concept map of the paper to map it as well. So there were the 3 foundational skills feeding in before this. And then this was like really the brute force part of it that we often will have to do when we do work in science. Is just like, you have to do it. The only way to do it is to go through it. And that was kind of the goal with it there for them.
Thank you. Really impressive.
Thank you. It's been fun. It's been really fun. And I had amazing GSIs who really went along for the ride.
Well, and I feel like there's this meta level process skills that it's like, okay, as they go forth in their scientific journey, they're more mindful of how effective group work in any of the teams that they're on. And your GSIs are learning this too. So that's going to bear fruit for them as they are team leaders themselves and maybe PIs on projects themselves.
I mean, I've learned a lot about reading about collaboration. I'm like, oh, that's how we can make collaborations better, even in our own work, you know, like reading this research. Oh, like, oh, there's research on this. People study how to make this work. Why are we not looking at that work even with our own collaborations? Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Tina. So our next speaker is Robin Ball, winner of one of the Distinguished Teaching Awards this year. Was so excited to see another nerd up there. So her talk is about medical racism and incorporating those topics into the classroom in ways that are really synergistic with the classroom topics, which I think was really exciting about seeing how those things fold in. So Robin, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thanks. Let me just get all my windows arranged. Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming. So I'm Robin Ball. I'm a lecturer in the molecular and cell biology department, and I was in the lecturer teaching fellowship program last year. I designed a set of discussion-based assignments about medical racism for my Introduction to Human Physiology course. And this is a way of bringing in anti-racist teaching into my classroom. So let's start off actually with an example of health disparities that happened by race. So this is with COVID. This is recent data from the CDC, and we're looking at age-adjusted risk of COVID-19 infection here, hospitalization and death for these different races compared to white people in the US. So what we're seeing is that for people who identify as Hispanic or American Indian, they have a higher risk of getting infected. Those same groups plus Black Americans have a higher risk of hospitalization and then higher risk of death. So I'm wondering if people who are here could put into the chat some ideas you have about why we might be seeing these health disparities based on race. And there's a lot of different reasons. You've probably heard about some of these before. So yeah, you can just put in the chat and I'll read them off. Yeah, okay, so I'm seeing a couple of people put in access to like good quality healthcare. Yeah, definitely, yeah, disparate resources. That's kind of the main one I'm seeing here. Okay, well, that's good that nobody said differences in physiology. So yeah, implicit bias, who does the jobs, that's a good point about your risk of getting infected. Okay, so all of that kind of leads into this framework here. And the key thing is that there's no biological basis for race. That's race, or the biology, the physiology is not why we're seeing differences in health and who has these diseases, but instead it's racism. So we have these root causes: racism, class oppression, gender discrimination, et cetera, which leads to power and wealth imbalance. And then that affects the social determinants of health. So like what kind of jobs you have, where you live, if it's safe, if it's a healthy environment, availability for healthy food and good quality healthcare, like you all mentioned. And then that can lead to disparities in the distribution of disease. It can also lead to chronic stress, which can also affect health. So this is a really important concept. I teach this introductory human physiology course, and I want my students to understand this, right? So I'm like trying to figure out how am I gonna present this to my class. So before I go into the assignment that I designed, let me just talk a little bit about this course. So it's MCB 32, Introduction to Human Physiology, it's lower division. There are no prerequisites at all. It's about 400 students, lots of first and second years, mostly not MCB majors, but many of the students are interested in careers in medicine, healthcare, and public health. And so of course, when we had to move online, what I did was actually flip the class. So I put all my lecture notes and slides into pages, organized into modules and B courses, and I recorded short videos. And the really nice thing about this is that even though we're now back in person, it allows me some flexibility in what I cover. I don't have to just like jam it all into the lecture time. So in those modules, I did incorporate some social issues. So there's a little section on stereotype threat and how it relates to stress response. I talk about the stereotypes related to pain sensation, which I'll talk about in a second, and why there's a high prevalence of hypertension or high blood pressure in Black Americans. So I'm going to show you an example of one of the B courses pages, and you'll see like how this was incorporated to begin with. So this is just a small screenshot from a much longer page about touch and pain sensation. This is like a cutoff picture of the skin. So then I have these what I call medical moments or physiology history boxes that are kind of set apart from the biology. This one here is about this pervasive stereotype that Black people have thicker skin and less sensitive nerve endings, so they can't feel as much pain, which is completely false, totally untrue. Everyone has the same kind of skin. And this is a recent report that looked at what medical students think about this in medical residents. And there's a non-zero percentage of people in medical school who think that these stereotypes are true, which is bad. So we want it to be 0%. So this is how it used to look on the pages. I was not checking if students were reading this. It was not tested. There's no discussion about it. And so a couple of years ago, I was attending various anti-racist pedagogy workshops, and kind of the underlying theme I was getting from that was that you really need to discuss these topics in order for students to like kind of wrestle with these ideas. That was the basis of my LTF project. Like, how can I get these kind of passive things into a more active discussion? So what I did was I designed 5 of these discussion assignments that are using the B course's discussion board. So it's asynchronous. And I have a link if you want more details about that on my website. So for each one of these, students are given 1 or 2 papers to read. These could be news articles, blog posts, opinion pieces that are in medical journals, etc. So they read about an example. I give them question prompts just to kind of get them thinking about it. And then they write a couple of paragraphs in the discussion board, and it's organized within their discussion section. So it's not all 400 people all at once. You're just interacting with your discussion section. Once they post, then they can see the other students' responses, and then they also need to respond to 1 other person, and that's how they get full credit for this. And then my GSIs in the fall were really excited about these assignments, and so they decided that they also wanted to lead discussions in discussion section, and they kind of summarized the main points from that articles. So let me just show you what the 5 topics were. This is like the biology topic that week, and then you can see that the medical racism topics relate to that. I also tried to choose topics that hit on different aspects of medical racism. So the first one is just an introduction to the topic. There's a couple of good TED Talks for that. And the main thing is I want students to understand that race is not biological and that these health inequities result from racist policies. The second one relates to the reproductive system. And this is a historical example of the very first clinical trials for the birth control pills. These were done in Puerto Rico with subjects who were poor women. So they're basically being taken advantage of, and there's a long history of medical testing and taking advantage of marginalized groups. And then the third one was the one I showed you earlier, so that healthcare professionals can have these biases and they don't even know it. So that's the stereotype related to feelings of pain, and it leads to differences in how patients are treated. So Black patients get fewer pain medications. The fourth one is a pharmaceutical. So it's a medication that was approved by the FDA for heart disease, but only for Black patients. And there's no reason for that. This medicine should treat everybody. It should work for everybody. But it was really driven by commercial interests of the pharmaceutical companies. And then the fifth one is actually a very common problem, which is that there's all these medical measurements that we do, and you put the numbers into algorithms and click a box for the person's race, and it modifies the outcome. So like it has a multiplier for if you're Black or white or whatever. So the example here is for kidney function. So Black patients need to have worse kidney function. They need to be more sick in order to qualify for a kidney transplant, right? And there's no reason for that. There's many of these. I'm kind of surprised when I learned about all of this. And the doctors don't even know that it's happening. It's just like, a box they check on the computer. They're not even sure that that's going on. Okay, so before I tell you what the students thought of this, let me just tell you what I learned from this experience. So I did it last summer and fall. And the very first thing we noticed was that students do not know how to refer to racial groups correctly. And that's kind of our fault. We didn't tell them that. So what I did was I made a terminology page, just very clear, you know, for this group, write this, for this group, write this. And we have references for students who want to learn more about that. And this is linked in every single assignment. And then the GSIs also took off points whenever the students said something incorrectly. So that seemed to work. The second one was harm to students who've experienced medical racism. So in the fall semester, a student contacted me because their family had experienced a lot of trauma related to medical racism, and they just didn't feel like they could do the assignment. So my solution for that was to provide a form to students, to send it out as an announcement. And basically they could fill it out. They don't need to even explain it to me, but they could fill it out to opt out of the assignments. And in my class of 415 students in the fall, only 2 students did that. So I don't think that they're taking advantage of the situation, and we just gave them the points, and that was fine. And then the third one was that some students complained about the limited coverage of material. So most of our examples were with Black Americans. I mean, but that's really who the racism is targeted towards. But I understood the student's point. So we have a final paper in the class, and one option now is to do research on another example of medical racism. So this way students can really write about a topic more and learn more about something that's relevant to them. And some of these papers were really great, and I learned a lot. And actually Elliot Smith is here, so that's our librarian who helped set up our library guides so that students could find good references for this material. Okay, so what did the students think? So I did a survey in the fall before they did the assignments and a survey after they did the assignments. So this is data from after. So basically I'm just asking, you know, what did you think about doing these medical racism discussions? So the majority were glad that they had this opportunity to learn about the topics. They learned something, which is good. And they thought it's important to discuss the topics in a science class. And only 3% thought it was inappropriate. But even so, nobody complained to me about it. So I think it's all good. The students, on the most part, enjoyed the assignments. So then I also had these statements in the pre-survey and in the post-survey. And students had to say if they disagreed or agreed with them, so that we could see if there's a shift in their thinking about physiology and race. So the first statement is there are physiological differences between different races. And in the pre-survey at the beginning of the semester, it's a split about 50-50. So half the students agree, half disagree. But at the end, after we did the medical racism assignments, most of the students disagree with that statement, which is good. There are no physiological differences between different races. So that was really encouraging. And then another statement, race is a socio-political category and has no biological basis. Again, kind of split 50-50 beforehand, but after the assignments, most of the students agreed with that. And there are many more examples of this in the survey, but we really do see this shift in how students are thinking about race and biology. And then just to wrap it up, I'm motivated to keep doing this, but if I needed any more motivation, there's this great student quote. I just asked them, to kind of free write on the survey. So the student said, integrating the reality of racism in medicine that continues to exist is a crucial step to dismantling and fully eradicating these flaws. Having conversations on issues like these, regardless of how uncomfortable they may be, is important, as people taking this course are most likely going to go into health fields and potentially become primary health professionals. If these issues are not discussed in this form of higher education, when will they? Great. So I just want to thank everyone who was in the LTF group last year, and especially Ryan and Michelle. And I also really need to thank my GSIs. They really were all in on this. They're all science graduate students or, in medicine, and they just were really excited to work on this. And especially Rachel and Aminta. So they were both in the joint medical program with UCSF, which really focuses a lot on social justice issues. And when I told them I wanted to do this, they sent me all the resources. They're like, read these books, watch these videos, and that was so helpful. So yeah, so that's it. Thank you for attending my talk. And I'm happy to answer questions and share anything else with you. I don't have the slides available, but maybe we could make that happen. Yeah.
Maybe it's something that we could publish on the CTL site if speakers are willing to share their slides alongside the videos, perhaps.
Yeah, and this information is also on my website, which was linked earlier. I also have my B courses page ready to go if anyone wants to see that. I'm just looking through the chat to see if there's anything here.
Rebecca and I were both trying to find our links again. I, for one, would love to see the way that you lay it out in B courses, because you were talking about setting them up as pages, which I think can be very elegant. So I want to, I mean,
I want to share.
Hopefully it's elegant as I'm like saying. I think I've just seen your work, so I'm familiar.
Yeah, so this is the main page. But if you go to modules, then everything's in modules here. So there's like a start here module that has the syllabus and stuff like that. There's each one of our GSIs made a page for their discussion section. Here's the medical racism discussion assignment. So each one had a page that introduced the topic. Let's see if I can just open this in another window. No, here. Okay, yeah, so here's like the first one. So I just wrote this introduction here, and then I guess the links aren't here anymore, but there'd be links to the videos that they need to watch or the articles that they need to read. We had community agreements and ground rules. That was something that my LTF group helped me with. And then here is the terminology. Now we have it as like a separate page that's linked to. Oh yeah, here's the actual videos there. Yeah, and then in terms of the course material, let's see, I think I have one of these open, right? So each topic, each one of these used to be a lecture, but now it's in here. So the first page has the key concepts, video introduction that either I've made or I just found on YouTube. And then we just hit next and it just goes into the material. So all of this was in my lecture notes, and these are like pictures from my slides. Practice questions, they used to be like clicker questions in class. Now they're in these green boxes, and sometimes I give them the answers, sometimes I don't. Yeah, and then I have a video lecture at the bottom of most of these pages. And then let's see if I have an example here. Some of these questions are a little bit harder, and so I'll say we'll go over it in Zoom. Well, in the fall is on Zoom, but it'll be in person in the future. So giving them the practice question, but not giving them the answers to try and get them to come to class. And here's another video. And at the end of each module, let me go back to that page. I have homeworks. So this is like it's the quiz function in B courses, but they get like 3 or 4 attempts to get the answer right. So they need to finish this by the end of the week. So there'll be a couple modules released each week and they answer that. Yeah.
Can you, a question that was put in the chat earlier, I'm gonna say shamefully by me, but well, not shamefully, but I was wondering about with the dynamic nature of language, if you had favorite resource areas for what's suitable for identifying racial groups or speaking about racial groups.
I think there, I'd have to look it up to be sure, but I think the one that I used was the APA style guide, actually. Mm-hmm. That one was pretty good. And there were some that we just, my GSIs kind of had a debate on it, like capitalizing the word white. And I kind of found some articles that explained kind of in favor of that, some against it, and I could kind of see both sides to this issue. So I just left it up to the students, but challenged them, you know, like read these articles and be willing or be able to justify why you've chosen to do it one way versus the other. Yeah, and I'll have to just kind of keep my eye on these as language kind of updates and moves forward.
And I think some of what was highlighted on your page was using terms like Asian patients, or right, like, or just saying Asian, you know, or like, you know, like the descriptors, the order of the descriptors matters.
Right, right. Yeah, you need to use it as an adjective and then have a word after it. So patients or people. Yeah.
I had a question for you, Robin. If you noticed, since you had a number of these discussions, if students became more comfortable talking about these topics, or maybe if students that came in already comfortable, if you know the classroom could kind of lean on them earlier in the course.
Yeah, that's a good question. So probably my GSIs would be better able to answer that, but I do think they became more comfortable. I ended up having to grade the 3rd, 4th, and 5th one for one of my GSIs who actually was kind of being traumatized by reading these. So that was really great for me to see what students were writing. And what I would see sometimes is that a student would put in an answer and it was thoughtful, but not quite there. But then when they would read other students to respond to it, I could see them say like, oh, I get it now. Okay, yeah, you know, so that was really great to see them learning from each other. Yeah, and they were all just really good and smart and intelligent answers. So yeah, it was great to read those.
In your ground rules, did you, I would love to see your ground rules actually again on this slide, but I'm wondering if there was language there about that it's going to be messy and like we're going to make mistakes and like being kind to each other as we're navigating.
I don't know, kind of maybe a little bit in there.
Yeah, the best
be
yeah. transparent about misstep or hurts. Yeah.
I got most of this from the UC Berkeley Principles of Community and from some other workshop that I attended. I do think one thing that I'm going to add is that I don't have a video of me like introducing this assignment. So I think on this very first one that needs to be in here because there are still some students who were attributing differences in health outcomes to differences in like economic, social economic, but then not going like the next step further, which is like, why are those differences there? Because of like the initial like historic racist policies and stuff. So yeah, I do think I need to do a little bit more of an introduction and make sure everyone is aware of the ground rules and terminology and so on. And then the GSIs also reiterated this in their discussion sections whenever they had a discussion. And they would tell their students ahead of time, like, hey, we're having this. If you don't feel comfortable, you don't need to come, you know, come 10 minutes late to class or whatever. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
This is fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing resource. Like, I'm loving that Ryan and Rebecca are putting things into the chat that like the rest of us can make use of as well. It's just, it is one of the beauties of the Zoom symposium, is this sharing of resources. Oh, Maricel is telling us we're going to close breakout rooms in 2 minutes. Good job, team. Team presenters staying on track with their time. Thank you so much for those of you that were attending and putting questions in the chat and chatting with our illustrious speakers. And thank you again, Robin and Tina, for excellent work, excellent inspiring work.